Sino siya? Ang lakas ng dating, ang lakas ng dating, ang lakas ng ganyan. Sino siya? Pag nakitang gumiling talagang manggigigil ka. Para abahin, dalin mo.
Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about Donald Trump and the Great Wall of that is going to divide Mexico from the United States. Okay, now here's the deal. I used to live in Mexico. I used to live in Mexico City and I used to live in Guadalajara. I'm moving back to Mexico in about a year. I'm going to be moving to a beach part of Mexico. But it's taken me a while because I got to finish up a few things here in the United States before I make the big move. But let's just talk about the wall. Okay. Now, Donald Trump is saying that he wants Mexico to pay for the wall. I don't think it's Mexico's responsibility to pay for that wall because I think that, you know, the United States, first of all, is the ones wanting the wall. So if the United States wants the wall, then the United States should pay for the wall. I know that the taxpayers are saying that they don't want to be responsible for it, but in the heart of protecting the country from terrorism and drug cartels and everything else, it's worth it to spend a little bit of the tax money to build the wall. Now, I don't know how successful that wall will be because they build tunnels underneath the ground to get to the United States. There's plenty of Mexican tunnels that are dug up in the desert that allows people to get to the United States or escape to Mexico if they're wanted by the law or something. So in my opinion, I think that the taxpayer should pay for the wall. I don't think Mexico should be obligated to pay for the wall because they're not the ones really rooting for it. They're not the ones saying that they want the wall. So I think personally that the United States should pay for the wall. So watch the next clip, and before I send you to the next clip, make sure you check out my Lion Plus Skincare channel. That's where I do my skin bleaching. It's Lion Plus Skincare. I think it's in that direction. On the page, it's going to say Lion Plus Skincare under my featured channel. I also have a silly channel that I call The Goddess Fifi 08. It's just a channel where I'm very silly and random. Okay, and then I have my daughter's channel, Anastasia Katerina. So go ahead and check those other channels out and watch the next clip.
Good evening. Today, the White House showed itself once again unable or unwilling to admit that the president is reversing himself on a key campaign promise. A promise spoken on debate stages, shouted from podiums, and chanted by adoring crowds of supporters at nearly every stop Mr. Trump made as a candidate. The promise was about that wall, that big, beautiful border wall, which wouldn't cost taxpayers a thing because the president insisted Mexico would pay for it.
We will build the wall 100%. I promise we will build the wall. And who's going to pay for the wall? Who's going to pay for the wall? Who? It'll be a great wall. Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Mexico will pay for the wall. And Mexico's going to pay for the wall, and they understand that. Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Believe me, 100%.
100%, he said. Well, now it's American taxpayers being told to pay for the wall, though the president still claims Mexico will pay for it someday, somehow. In fact, the president wants taxpayers to pay for the wall so badly he's threatening to shut down the government if Congress doesn't agree.
We are building a wall on the southern border, which is absolutely necessary. Build that wall. Now, the obstructionist Democrats would like us not to do it, but believe me, if we have to close down our government, we're building that wall.
Building the wall with taxpayer money, not Mexico's money, or shut down the government. Now, he may just be bluffing. It may just be a negotiating tactic. But lawmakers have only a few weeks before the government both runs out of money and hits the debt ceiling. Not addressing either could put the country's credit rating at risk. It could affect the stock market or spook consumers. Today, the White House was repeatedly asked why the president is willing to jeopardize the U.S. economy for something he once promised Mexico would pay for. The questions were asked a number of ways by a number of reporters to spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders, but time and again, she basically swatted them away.
Look, the president has talked pretty extensively about this. He campaigned on the wall. He won on talking about building the wall, and he's going to make sure that that gets done. We know that the wall and other security measures at the border work. We've seen that take place over the last decade, and we're committed to making sure the American people are protected. Once again, the president's committed to making sure this happens, and we're going to push forward. I certainly don't think any efforts have been abandoned. Again, this is something the president's committed to. He's committed to protecting American lives, and doing that through the border wall is something that's important. It's a priority, and we're moving forward with it. Look, I think the president's been clear that this is a priority. Protecting American citizens is a priority, something he's committed to, and we're going to, as I've said multiple times today, he's committed to seeing that through.
Is there a need to force a government shutdown to get the wall built?
I think I've answered this question several times.
Well, what's so interesting about this wall is that we now have reporting on how the idea apparently began. It comes from Josh Green's remarkable book about Steve Bannon called Devil's Bargain. He writes, quote, "Inside Trump's circle, the power of illegal immigration to manipulate popular sentiment was readily apparent, and his advisors brainstormed methods of keeping their attention-addled boss on message." They're talking about candidate Trump. Former campaign aide Sam Nunberg telling Green, quote, "Roger Stone and I came up with the idea of the wall. We talked to Steve," meaning Steve Bannon, "about it." Nunberg went on to say it was to make sure he talked about immigration. Green writes that candidate Trump at first seemed indifferent, but changed his mind when he tried it out in a speech in January of 2015. And as Nunberg recalls, the place just went nuts. Now, if Josh Green's account is right, the U.S. economy may hinge now on a throwaway catchphrase, a catchphrase that just happened to catch on. More from CNN's Sarah Murray, who joins us now. Has the White House offered any more information following the president's threat about shutting down the government?
Well, aside from what you saw from Sarah Huckabee Sanders today, they really haven't given us an indication of why suddenly the president has decided this is something he would be willing to shut down the government over. They also didn't offer any real explanation as to how he squares an ask like this with what you showed was a regular campaign promise, the notion that this wall was going to be built and American taxpayers wouldn't be on the hook for it. Of course, we know that as a candidate and since he became president, the president of Mexico has made one thing very clear to President Trump. They're not paying for that wall.
And the last time the government shut down was 2013. What happens if the administration follows through with this?
Anderson, Republicans are urging the president not to move forward with a plan like that, and there's a reason for that. They paid the political price for doing this in 2013. They led it to this government shutdown, and the headlines there were brutal, and they came out every single day. Stories about preschools that were closed, kids that couldn't go to preschools, programs that doled out formula for infants for low-income mothers that were being pinched. There were soldiers who were being killed in Afghanistan who would come back to the United States, and their families couldn't get death benefits and couldn't get the government to pay for their funeral costs. That is a tiny, tiny sample of the kind of headlines that happen when you shut down the government. Republicans remember that, and there's a reason. That's the reason they're telling the president this is not a cliff you want to go over.
Jorge, for this president who ran on the whole idea that Mexico was going to pay for the wall to now be talking, threatening to shut down the U.S. government should Congress not provide funding for the wall, I mean, that is a huge flip-flop.
It's a big change, but I think that President Trump hasn't told the truth to the American people. He has to tell the people that on January 27th, according to the Washington Post, he had a conversation with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, and President Peña Nieto told him many times that Mexico was not going to pay for the wall. For Mexico, it's a matter of dignity. That's what President Peña Nieto told him. And then President Trump said, according to the transcripts, that he preferred that this was not going to be discussed in public. Unfortunately, Peña Nieto agreed to that, and he hasn't confronted President Trump. But right from the beginning, Mexico said that they were not going to pay for the wall. That's where we are right now. And on the other hand, that the wall is really a stupid idea because there's no invasion coming from Mexico. The undocumented population has remained stable for over a decade, and almost 45% of all undocumented immigrants come by plane or with a visa. So even if you have a big, beautiful $20 billion wall, it's going to serve no purpose.
It is interesting that in that call with the Mexican president that the president had that was, as you said, leaked to the Washington Post, the transcript of it, President Trump seemed more concerned about the Mexico president just publicly talking about Mexico not paying for the wall and saying that it would look bad for President Trump. He seemed almost more concerned about the optics of it and sort of the political ramifications for him.
Exactly. It was a matter of perception. Then he thought President Peña Nieto was going to agree to that. And he even threatened President Peña Nieto. He said, well, if you talk about it, then there's going to be problems with the free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. That's where they are right now. They're negotiating the deal. But the fact is that Mexico, from the beginning, everybody knew, I knew, that Mexico was not going to pay for the wall. That was done during the campaign. And now President Trump has to tell the truth.
I mean, the president's supporters, though, will point out that, crossings across the southern border have dropped dramatically. Apprehensions have dropped dramatically since President Trump took office. You and I have talked about this before, and I think in the past you said, fear works to stop people from coming across. But doesn't the president deserve some credit for using the bully pulpit, even before he's really done anything on the wall, to reduce people crossing over?
I would say two things. First of all, fear works. Yes, I think President Trump is incredibly unpopular in Latin America. Among probably some of the most hated people in Latin America or in Mexico might be President Trump and Sheriff Arpaio. On the other hand, it was before President Trump arrived to the White House when we saw a declining in the number of Mexicans coming to this country, so much that right now, more Mexicans are leaving the United States than coming to this country. So it is not entirely because of Donald Trump, but yes, I have to admit that the number of immigrants trying to cross illegally from Mexico to the United States has been reduced.